Coming up on this episode of Together for Good, I'm sitting down with Keving Dragseth, and we're going to talk about what's frustrating when you work for the church.
Oh, jeez.
Here we go.
Man.
Welcome to the Together for Good podcast, a podcast created by Bethany Lutheran Church in Cherry Hills Village, Colorado, and hosted by me, Pastor Nate Preisinger. On Together for Good, our goal is to provide practical, engaging content that supports you without expectations. Whether you're feeling disconnected from traditional religion or simply exploring what faith means in your life, we're here to walk alongside you. No matter where you are on your journey of faith, we're glad you're here. Welcome to Together for Good.
Wow, thank you, Nate. This is right up my alley.
This is right up your alley.
It is. It's interesting because it's one of those things where when you care about it so much, like for me, I care so deeply about the work of the church and even about the commitment that the ELCA has to its people.
Yeah.
And to people, not just its people, but to people. And then how we go about that.
Yeah. Help listeners understand first and foremost, though, like you've worked for the church basically your entire professional life. Is that fair? With a little gaps here and there, but just lay out real quick the different places that you've worked.
Yeah.
Because I think that's interesting.
Yeah. Straight out of high school, I was a camp counselor in the summer. And then I worked on staff at a Bible camp in Minnesota in the winters, lived on site, went to college nearby, and then was a youth director at a small congregation in rural Minnesota during college as well, and then worked my way through summer positions and winter positions at a camp in Minnesota, and then worked full-time as a program director at an outdoor ministry site with 3 camps, Green Lake Lutheran Ministries.
Shout out Camp Green Lake.
And then Katie and I met at the camp in Minnesota. When we got married, we moved out to Colorado. Her home congregation was Bethany. So we were just coming here, and then they had an opening in 2007. And so the youth director at the time, Aaron Morris, talked to me and was just like, hey, I heard you were going to church here and that I need to talk to you.
No
so
way.
Came on as associate director interim. That was only a 6-month.
No way. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You lasted more than 6 months.
Rolled
didn't you?
in after that. The next year when Aaron went up to Minnesota, became the youth director. We had some budget cuts with the 2008 economy. And then I was here until September of 14. Then I went up to Fort Collins, helped 4 congregations up there start a cooperative ministry, youth ministry between 4 ELCA congregations up there, realizing that congregations were lacking the sense of mass with youth ministries. Hard to maintain youth groups when kids felt that they were coming to church and there was nobody else there. So we started doing all Wednesday and outside programming all together in all 4 congregations. Really neat experience.
Very cool. And then that was it.
Loved that just because of that's the direction the church is going. That almost seemed
that type of collaboration.
Yeah, that collaboration ministry. That's where it just seems like that's the direction it has to go at this point.
And I think that's one of the frustrating things, speaking to it about working at churches, is that the Lutheran Church is this large entity and we all share largely the same belief systems. Mm-hmm. If I walk into any Lutheran church, I pretty much know the theology I'm going to get, more or less. And then, but you have all these Lutheran churches, and we just waste so much money replicating the same costs.
Yeah.
So that everyone can have their building, so that everyone can have their copy machine, like down to those little nitty gritty details. Yeah. But you just think about how this is now money that is being given to the mission of the church and not really being used on ministry.
Yeah.
Like how many millions of dollars are given to ELCA churches every year that then just get turned around so that each of these little churches can have their own copy machine so that they can copy their own bulletins in-house for Sunday.
Yeah, and even think about like how many different versions of the Pentecost bulletin were out in the ELCA yesterday across the whole ELCA.
Yeah.
when we cover all the same stuff, most everybody probably did the same readings.
Yeah.
Most everybody did a gathering, a word, a meal, a sending, but yet we probably had out of 3,600 congregations, or how many ever congregations are in the ELCA now, we probably had 90% of them each had their own unique by one sentence or two bulletins that we couldn't just share.
I know.
How can we not just share bulletins?
I get it too, because there is a piece of like encouraging creativity within congregational settings. I think is really cool. It's one of the things I love about Bethany is we really do a lot of unique things here that are a little bit different. And so I understand why people want to hold on to their own, but everyone also, it's like, everyone thinks their kid is the most special kid of all. Everyone thinks their church is the most special church of all. And when you actually get out there and see what's happening, like, we're all doing the same thing here.
It is. And what's the part to me that is weird, especially in suburbia or urban areas, is that these are the places where a lot of what the ELCA stands for should be thriving. When you talk about reaching out to the marginalized and being present in the community among people who might not feel they fit in any other church settings, if we were to actually be living that out and living it, we have all of the facilities we need, like in the city of Denver, to do all that stuff. And we don't need to get rid of buildings, the sentimental part, which is the buildings. They become our mission centers for...
I love that idea.
For certain things. And that you have a central congregation. You still have your buildings for...
But those become outposts for outreach.
Outposts for outreach. Exactly.
Right. So this is our job help center.
Yep.
This is our...
advocacy center for LGBTQ. This is our advocacy center for the unhoused. Or this is our center for this or that, whatever it is. But we don't have to get rid of facilities necessarily. We just repurpose. And then it's still present. If we have somebody that has a desire for a funeral or a wedding or a celebration, we still have the facilities to be at the same place where generations of families also held those celebrations. We don't need to... It's not like we need to sell off all the ELCA's properties. That's not where I envision this going at all. I just see that we need to start living out mission and vision for what we say we are as the ELCA.
And in a more collaborative type of sense and setting. And that's the hard part, because we grow so attached to our little piece of this. And in the same sense, I just think about one of the ways is actually the current bishop, I think it's the current bishop of upstate New York synod. I think pretty sure he said this, that we're one church with, in upstate New York, there are 150 congregations with 150 satellite locations. But that's how the evangelical megachurches do it, right? It is one church, and then they have 17 campuses spread across the state in different ways. Yep. And a lot of different things happen at the different campuses, but they're all still connected. Like, I don't think that's a bad analogy,
right,
especially in line with exactly what you're saying of, no, why couldn't church look like this?
Yeah.
And it'll never happen. That's the frustrating part too, is that one of the most frustrating parts about church is being able to see a better way to do things, and then to also know, and it's probably, if it changes, it's going to be so slow.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that? I'm sure in all, like even the 4 congregational youth group that you did up north there, that was a totally new idea. I'm guessing it wasn't easily accepted. It doesn't exist anymore, right?
I'm not exactly sure what the format of it is.
Okay.
Now I would guess they would probably still do confirmation together, but I don't know outside of that what it looks like up there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's slow moving. Anytime you have a committee or a task force, and you slowed it down by 20 times. So it is gonna take forever.
My friend works for the ELCA, and he told me that there is currently a committee on exploring the effectiveness of committees.
Good God.
I think it's the most perfect analogy.
That's perfect. We're talking about things that frustrate us about working in the church.
The endless committees. But so what's the alternative? Because I will also, when you're dealing with a large organization, a lot of these structures just become necessary evils.
They are. To me, what's frustrating is having almost always worked on the local church level. It's what direction or what expectations do you have out of either the synodical level or the church-wide level?
Yeah.
And to me, a lot of these decisions, it just feels like it would be most helpful and just best led by the larger institutions.
Yeah.
If the ELCA was to come in, church-wide was to come in and say, listen, we believe that there needs to be one congregation that's ELCA per every 8,000 people in a demographic area. Or we think that there needs to be one out in the rurals, one per every so many square miles. Or for them to lead what that looks like for us, and not the part that is so difficult is that a lot of these congregations that know they're facing closure in the next few years, it's going to basically fall to whoever the president, the volunteer president of that congregation is at that time, to make that final decision. And for a lot of these people, their grandparents might have been some of the founding members.
Yeah.
And that's a hard line to be stuck in when you're the one that feels that you have to make this decision. What's a decision that needs to be made? But, my great-grandparent was a founding member of this congregation, and now I'm the one in the family tree that's going to be known as the person that shut this congregation down. Like, when there's so much sentimental background to a lot of these things, I don't think that's really fair to put on congregation volunteers to make that decision.
No.
To shut down and just to close congregations.
And here's what I'll say too. I think it's a failure of theology. Hear me out. In that we get so sentimentally attached to the congregation or the building or this idea. And that's never what our faith is about. And like the places where I've seen congregations close for that being done at its best is the times when it's been facilitated well, so that it can be seen very tangibly how the closing of this congregation will now make new ministry possible. It's a very death and resurrection thing.
Yeah.
But if all we care about is the sentimentality of this building and the memories I have here, like none of that is in line with our Lutheran theology. Like that just literally doesn't fit with what we talk about on a Sunday morning, at least in the best scenarios. And it just feels like we've failed. And it's not the council president's job to be an expert in Lutheran theology. Right. And yet this seems to happen again and again, where all these churches are just so clinging to the way that it used to be. And it's just like, that is a theology of death. Yeah. If you just are only holding on to the way that it used to be, and the only thing you can hope for is for the past to return, like that, then you're hoping, like that's a zombie, right? Like a zombie is dead, reanimated, but still basically dead. And our theology is not about Jesus came back as a zombie. It's not like he was really alive. And so I think about, my friend was a church planner in Rochester. He started a Lutheran church in Rochester, but he started it because this previous Lutheran church decided to close, and they gifted him the building and a chunk of money to start this new ministry. And they did. And it really was very vibrant for a long time. That's the best example of how this can work. But that's never how it happens.
I know. But I think another part that you touched on there, though, is messaging.
Yeah.
I think in the church as a whole right now, we're not doing a very good job on how we message what it is that we're doing.
Yeah.
What our messaging is around what it is that we're doing. It's still shocking to me when I get into a conversation and COVID comes up. I understand the impact that COVID had on congregations.
Absolutely.
And on everybody's lives as a whole. But what is that resurrection piece since COVID?
And if we're just talking about the past, then the past is just going to come back to haunt us. It's going to zombify and going to be walking and lurching around. And now you've got this zombie church that just like, it's all dead.
Yeah.
You were so good at this. You challenged our faith formation team because we were talking so much about COVID and how much it affected it. And you're like, hey, you did this whole thing. Like, you have to take your foot off the brake. Like, if we're just talking about COVID all the time, we have one foot on the brake and one foot on the gas, and that's just burning out the engine. Let go of the COVID thing, get your foot off the brake so that we can move forward. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah. And what has ministry at Bethany looked like in the past 4 years since we had that conversation compared to
we don't talk about COVID at all. We really don't.
When we all have come back from conferences and meetings, and we'll go, oh my gosh, all the leaders talked about was how it's been so hard since COVID, and that nobody's ever come back to our congregation since then, and we can't get youth to come here since COVID.
Yeah.
And we all go, the way you just presented that, I wouldn't want to come there either. You are so down and out on what's going on in your congregation. I was on a call a year ago about faith formation in the synod and what that needs to look like next. And it was one of the most depressing conversations I've ever been a part of.
And it's so hard because it did do all of these things that are being said, right? And we know that here too. There are people we have not seen since 2019 who just did not come back. And I know Bethany had more numbers and was more able to withstand that type of loss than other congregations. But I don't think that's really the point here. What we talk about, the messaging, permeates the life of the congregation. Mm-hmm. And that's another frustrating piece that I have, is I feel like every time I turn around, I am presented with another report or another article about why the church is dying. And it feels like that's all we talk about. And I just don't think that ever needs to matter if we actually believe that God defeated death.
Yeah.
Okay, if the church is dying or the numbers aren't what they used to be, it just seems so irrelevant to what we need to be talking about. And if you put all your focus on the death and the doom and the gloom numbers, then guess what? That's where you're going to end up. If that's where your vision is directed, then that's the direction you're going to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what's the alternative?
I think we need to view the church for what it is, and it's a lot more than just Lutheran, ELCA, mainline Protestant congregations, and look across the board and not be so scared of the other denominations and so scared of other churches and what it is that they're doing, and lean into how do we work collaboratively with these congregations. Now, yes, the numbers in mainline are showing decrease over the decades, but the numbers in non-denominational are showing increase.
Yeah.
And so when you as a community grows, you also have congregations that grow into each of these new communities. So there's way more churches across the board, my guess would be, now than there was 30 years ago. But they're just not Lutheran or Catholic.
But
or
here's the other thing with all that. I heard this recent explanation of some of those numbers too. Numbers are definitely down, and it's just not a fair comparison for us to try and compare numbers now to 1950. Mm-hmm. Because in 1950, the family unit was a very different reality than it is today. And people were having more kids, and they were having kids earlier. And so the family numbers are probably a lot closer than we realize, but there's way more couples who are choosing not to have kids who have joined a church. And whereas that couple in 1950 would have had 4 kids. And you just think about how that immediately changes the arithmetic here. But we're trying to compare these two things and be like, oh my gosh, it was so much better in 1950. It's like, no, like it was just different. And it's probably a lot closer than you think. Like in terms of people going to church, it hasn't honestly changed as drastically as we think it has.
Correct.
Yeah, it's just different family sizes, different family realities.
And a natural place that's hard to capture is people between confirmation, so like early high school, and the first child being born. And as that time has expanded out from 100 years ago, you had your first kid at 18 to 20, and now you don't have your first kid until 28 or 30 years old.
Yeah.
It's a larger gap in time that you're taking a little pause from church to figure it out what you want for your life in faith.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. Yeah. Any other frustrations that you want to air? This is your
I think a topic is like this whole thing around lack of pastors.
Oh, yeah.
We don't
have enough pastors. Yeah.
I think I don't believe that at all. I think probably, and maybe this ties into the last two things we've talked about, we probably have too many institutions. So we actually have enough pastors, but we just have so many roles to fill. When you look at, even if you look at churchwide,
yeah,
if there's 250 to 300 employees at churchwide, how many of them are pastors that aren't serving a local congregation, right? That's like 10% of the roster potentially is working out of one building. So, of all of our pastors. So
I never thought about that.
To me, we don't have a shortage. It's just that we put them into bureaucratic roles instead of into local ministry roles. Or even you look at this expansion of the size of synod staffs. Those used to be 4 to 7. You have a lot of synods now with 15 staff members. You pulled 8 potential rostered leaders out of your own synod, and if you do that across 65 synods, those are real numbers.
This is you're giving off really strong Doge energy here, Kevin.
Oh, jeez.
I should have known that you would have gotten to this point. It's fascinating, though, because there are, I think, too, I know that there's a lot of restrictions that people put on their calls now and say, hey, I can only serve congregations in these areas. There's a lot of good reasons for that. And in the same sense, that's different than it used to be. And I don't think I don't know if that was even an option like 50 years ago for you to just say, hey, I can only serve a congregation in these areas. I'm pretty sure they just said, you're going.
To do 15 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So more to a broader audience point too, though, because as we get into the ELCA minutia, I think the other part that I do want to talk with you about in terms of what's frustrating about working at a church is just the general perspective of Christianity and the church today.
Yeah.
And I know both you and I tend to have a lot of friends who are not church people at all. I think about the people that I spend most of my time with outside of work.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of them go to church with any regularity at all.
Yeah.
How does that work for you? Like, especially just given the type of person you are, when you have to admit to someone that this is where you work.
Yeah.
How does that conversation go?
It's usually them responding with, whoa, really?
Yeah. Just
when did you start that? Oh, about 30 years ago. Really? Wow. No, but then I think it's a good conversation starter.
Yeah.
And talking a little bit about how the church for me is a calling in how we respond to people and how we respond to the needs of the world. And I feel very strongly that is the church's job.
Yeah.
I don't look to a lot of other entities to fill those roles.
Yeah.
Which also informs some of my political beliefs, which is where that comes to a little bit of a surprise to people sometimes. But that I feel that calling, it's through the church that I think we need to respond to these people, which is then also why I get frustrated with how the church sometimes responds to things that might be happening in the world or in our community.
Yeah. So then the other interesting thing about you too, Kevin, is that, you have this like deep love and care for the church. And for that particular reason, like how can we respond and care for the world? And I feel like so often what I hear from you is about all the ways that the church doesn't do that. Yeah. That you're just so frustrated with. Mm-hmm. Kevin will not be seen in a pew on a Sunday morning for a whole church service.
Oh gosh, no.
When's the last time you were in there for the whole 60 minutes? Maybe when your friend came the other week.
No, I was in and out that one. When I'm in my hometown, I do.
Okay.
So
okay.
I worship there once a year, once every 2 years.
But that's just not an important piece to you.
No.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I cannot sit or the sit-stand combination thing for an hour straight. It's not, I can't do it.
Gotcha. But yet you think there's so much other stuff that happens. So what should the church be doing? You have the floor. You're Bishop Kevin. Let's hear it.
No, I just think taking a real look at what's happening in the community and responding to it somehow. I think of some of the moments that I felt very engaged in the community. I think about the Arapahoe school shooting in December of 2013.
Yep.
And we jumped in, the peer ministers, the high school peer ministers of Bethany, put together a prayer service for that Sunday morning. This was on Friday afternoon. By Sunday morning, we had a community-wide prayer service available at Bethany. We had an adult side, parent side. We had a youth side, student side happening in this building. People needed it.
Yeah.
They wanted to turn to the church, but they didn't know where, or there wasn't anything available. A fascinating thing, I remember Sarah Bjornebo sharing that one of the most powerful things that afternoon is that as students were fleeing the school, they all ran over to the church that was behind. They ran by the grocery store to get to the church behind the grocery store because they knew the church was a safe place to go.
Wow.
With the school shooting going on.
Yeah, I know that's St. Tim's Episcopal, I think.
Right there.
Wow.
And people are looking for the church in those moments.
Yeah.
And people are hesitant to go back to that school. So we organized, along with some neighboring congregations here, we had a prayer walk the day before school went back into session at Arapahoe and invited the whole community. We had staff members there. We had police officers there that were there the day of the shooting. We had administrators from the school came to that. And we're like, we need whatever hope we can have in order to re-enter these buildings tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we had about 100 of us that carried a cross around to each of the entry points of that building. And we prayed outside of the cafeteria. We prayed outside of the library where some of the events of that day happened, and really let the community know we're going with you.
Yeah. So what else does that look like? Like, I love that story of responding to tragedy. One of the things I wonder is if the church does worship once a week just so we'll have something to do. How else can the church continue to do that type of stuff in a more day-to-day or week-to-week type setting? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just wonder what our small groups are geared around. When you look at what are the things that hit so hard in our families or in our personal lives, and how is the local congregation present for those things? Some of us are hurt by what's happening in the schools and with our kids. How do we respond to that? How do we have space for parents to share that this is a scary time to raise a child? What about...
No, let me jump in. I love that, because I also just think we went over to some friend's house last night and it was great, super fun. And then there was a moment when I went out on the back porch and was talking, and my friend was just telling me, he's like, yeah, like, wife and I got in a big argument this morning. We were just talking about what it was about and just processing it together, and left it in a good place. He and his wife are fine, but it was like, no, this is more of what church needs to make available for people. It's like, you need that community in that space and those groups of people to process just the normal things that happen in the course of daily life. Like you're saying, struggling with stuff at school with the kids, or we had a problem with a neighborhood kid the other day. That was also part of what we processed with this couple last night. Like, how can the church facilitate that real community connection and care?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is just an open setting. I think our parents group on Wednesday nights does that. We've had a lot of nights that are about fears around bullying.
Yeah.
That's what we talk about for the night. And it's not that we're coming from a place of here's what needs to happen, but it's everybody collaborating on how do we do this as parents?
Yeah.
We've had nights in parents group that it goes to politics.
Yeah.
The fears around what's happening in politics. How can we process this together? And what are maybe some differing viewpoints that can help us understand what other people might be thinking? So it's not just hatred or
Right.
fear that's
Echo
happening, but
chamber.
maybe try to get an understanding of where other people might be coming from.
Yeah.
Social media, we talk about that a lot in small group settings, especially in regards to teens and youth having access to it. And just having a place to bounce some of those things that feels like a safe place where you're not being judged on your views on that. I also wonder about some of the larger stances that churches tend to take. And when we talk about racism and when we talk about class and when we talk about sexuality.
Yeah.
And how do we do that best? The ELCA's had an initiative around increasing diversity numbers over the last 40 years, and we've decreased our numbers. We're almost half as diverse as we wanted to be, or as what we were 20 years ago, and we were trying to double it in that same amount of time. So what doesn't work around that? Why isn't whatever we've tried not working at all? And it makes me wonder about the effectiveness of statements versus actions.
Yeah.
You know, what if we were intentional around giving people, here's what to consider. Here's a good place to start. It's going to happen in your own community, on your own block. If somebody makes a comment that is discriminatory in any way, a simple little thing to do is just be like, okay, let's not go there.
Yeah.
That's a simple step. And you earn that and you learn that respect on a very local level. And then helping expand, where does it go from there?
I feel
you don't
like
need to give a full lecture on why they don't need to say it. People usually know if they say something that's pushing the line a little bit.
Yeah.
But then how do we have the courage as Christians and through our Christian lens to be able to say, we're not going there?
I feel
That's
like
it. That's simple.
I feel like I do that with you in at least every meeting that we're in.
It is. And I need it. But do I respond well to it when somebody's authentic and transparent to it? And
well, not trying to pick a fight. Like, I love the way you're talking about it. And I know you do that too in your own setting. Like, it's not coming at it so aggressively that now the person's going to respond with defensiveness, which is only going to make it worse. Yeah, there's subtle and caring ways. And really, to tie a bow on everything you're saying, and honestly, like this whole conversation, what we're talking about is like, what's most frustrating about working at a church is all the times that the church doesn't focus on the most important things. Is when we're putting together statement after statement that just don't seem like they have any teeth to it, or that actually is helping a person understand how to deal with this on their local, individual, everyday level.
Yeah, I as you're saying that, I'm having a visual of the statement being on a banner and being flown over the top of a protest.
Yeah.
Not being engaged in whatever's happening on the ground, but oh no, there we have a statement up in the sky. It's going across right now. That's what we believe. Okay, we got some problems going on down here.
Yeah.
We need something to happen on the ground. I appreciate the banner behind the airplane up above what's happening, but there's real stuff happening on the ground here.
Yeah.
How do we respond to that?
And in the same sense, like, it can't be the larger church's responsibility. It's impossible for them to be present in every local, minute situation.
Totally.
And that's why they make the statements. But then those statements, like, someone has to do the interpretive work. Okay, if this is what we're about, but then let's help think about what that means.
Yeah, what are the tangibles?
The tangibles
on the local
here.
level? Yeah, exactly.
And it's not just with that's frustrating too, though, but it's like back to the other, it's when churches are so focused on their building rather than what's actually happening in the lives of their members, than actually building community, actually caring for each other. People are so focused on all the bad stuff that's happened before. That's all that they can talk about is COVID, and not actually paying attention to the real needs that are in front of them today that they could respond to and could have something vibrant take place in that spot.
And not only that this is something that happens on the church-wide or synodical level, but you even look at a congregation then. You look at Bethany, something I wonder about is we do all of this outreach for organizations that we partner with.
Yeah.
So even you go RIP medical debt that happened here, we're very happy and proud, as we should be, to help
I think we eliminated
people retire or eliminate
It's $2 million of medical
Yeah,
debt.
along within the organization. And Bethany contributed.
No, I don't know what Bethany contributed, but because of our contributions, they were able to eliminate $2 million
It's
of
the
medical
buying
debt.
power.
Yeah.
But then we got to look internal from that and look at our own members.
Who's got medical debt here?
Who's got medical debt here? And when you're sitting in a congregation and they're sitting here talking about all this medical debt that's being retired through an organization in North Carolina, and you're going, I'm right in front of you.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in your midst. I have medical debt. Where can I...
Yeah.
Do I have to go to North Carolina to get medical debt relief that ties back to my home congregation? Like, how do we actually work with the people from within that have...
Yeah, care
the
for our
needs?
community.
Care for our own community as well.
Yeah, it's a great point.
We offer gift cards for people that are experiencing struggles out in the community, but do our members have access to support if they need it, or feel welcome enough or comfortable enough to be able to come and ask for that? Or do we have an obvious venue to be able to come to Bethany for support for any of those things? I don't feel like we probably do.
Yeah.
So a weird place to be in as a congregation participant on a Sunday when you're up here hearing about all these things that we're doing for the larger community, and you're like, what about this local community?
Yeah.
We need help right here too. I'm experiencing this in my own family. How do I get support for that here? But we're sending off this much money for suicide prevention on a national level.
Yeah.
We need support in that right here in our own family, in the local
Yeah.
level. So it's not just church-wide. We got to own our own stuff in here too that we push out and don't care for truly locally either.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. We could go on and on about what frustrates us about the church all day. We should do a part 2.
Part 2, we should do a weekly series for the next 2 years.
Kevin Dragseth, thanks for coming to the podcast studio.
Great. It's good to be authentic, transparent around things that we wonder about as church leaders. Like, how do we do better?
And it's because we care so much.
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
what
because it really does have the possibility to be so powerful and important for people's lives and for the world.
Yeah.
And it just feels like we trip in the same places again and again and just get caught on the same dumb cycles. Yeah.
So I think the encouragement to listeners would be, what are ideas you have to help us
do better?
Do better.
Right.
Or what seems like really frustrating to you as a participant in a church that you might have a better way of viewing or looking at or implementing that maybe no other churches have thought of yet. Most of this stuff isn't too novel or too deeply thought that can't be done by lay people as well.
Yeah, come tell us about it. Come to the podcast studio. We'll interview you. As always, friends, thanks for listening. Stay in peace. Thank you for listening to the Together for Good podcast. If you'd like more resources for your walk of faith, please visit our website, bethany-denver.org, or download our mobile app by searching Bethany Connect in your phone's app store.